Hello, it's Dr. Nerida, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our very first Q&A edition of the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast. So today we have a couple of questions around what type of hay to feed a horse with ulcers. The question around a horse showing anxious behaviour is also suspected of having ulcers, and how can we feed to settle her down and ease her gut. And the last one is about a Shetland pony who is losing weight. I know, that jammed my cogs. I read that question and went, I don't know if I know how to answer that. I've never really come across a Shetland pony who is losing weight, but I think I can help based on the little pony's age. So we'll start with the very first question, which is, what are the best types of hay to feed a horse with ulcers? My very short answer to that question is lots of hay, any type of hay, and lots of different types of hay. Just feed hay. So because of the way a horse's stomach has evolved, it releases gastric acid 24/7. So no matter what your horse is doing, whether it's eating or not eating, there is hydrochloric acid being secreted into your horse's stomach. And of course, one of the easiest ways to cause squamous ulceration in your horse's stomach, which is the gastric ulcers that occur in the top part of your horse's stomach, is to not feed enough forage, so either not provide enough access to pasture or not feed enough hay. And what happens in those situations is the stomach empties out, fills up with very acidic acid. It doesn't fill up. It accumulates a pool of very acidic acid down in the bottom of it. And when your horse moves or just even tenses its abdominal muscles, that gastric acid then gets squeezed or splashed from the bottom part of the stomach up to the top part of the stomach and causes squamous gastric ulceration. So the best way to prevent that type of gastric ulceration in horses is just to feed lots of forage. So either lots of pasture or lots of hay. And then the type of hay to feed a horse with ulcers becomes almost secondary to the amount that you feed. So by far the amount of hay that you feed is most important. So you could have the most perfect types of hay, but not be feeding enough of those hays, and you would still end up with gastric ulceration. So amount is most important, and then the type of hay you're feeding comes secondary. So for the amount of hay for a horse with ulcers, you need to make sure that your horse is getting between 2 and 3% of their body weight in hay per day. So for an average size 500 kilogram off the track, that's between 10 and 15 kilograms of hay per day. It's quite a lot of hay. So you need to make sure they're getting that much hay. And you also need to make sure you're feeding that hay in a way that it takes the best part of a 24-hour period for them to eat it. So this is also very, very important for a horse that has ulcers, or a horse that is prone to ulcers, which is every horse. They're all prone to ulcers because of the way their stomach is designed. But making sure that you feed that hay in a way that it takes them a long time to eat it. So you want them to be eating for at least 16 or around 18 hours per day if you can. So using slow feeding systems that will slow them down with their eating hay and make them chew over much longer periods of time means that your horse's stomach will stay full of fibre and stay full of acid buffering saliva, and that both of those things dramatically reduce the risk of your horse having ulcers. I want to just quickly say in here, for a horse that already has ulcers, that's a veterinary condition, and you need to work with your vet to treat those ulcers. So it's very difficult to have ulcers heal unless you are working with your vet to actually use the proper medications to help your horse heal those ulcers. And then a lot of these nutrition strategies are then either to prevent ulcers in the first place or to stop them coming back. So on to the actual question of what are the best types of hay to feed a horse with ulcers. Really, any hay is great, because every hay that you feed your horse is going to cause your horse to chew. And when your horse chews, they create saliva, and the saliva dilutes or buffers the acid in their stomach, so it makes the acid much less likely to burn those holes to the top of your horse's stomach and create the squamous ulceration. And all hay, so any hay, will also create a fibre mat in your horse's stomach, or fill your horse's stomach up with fibre and actually prevent it from prevent the acid from splashing around and getting up to that top part of the stomach. So from those perspectives, all hays are great. Lucerne hay has been shown in research to actually help horses to heal. Lucerne and alfalfa are the same thing. So at least some lucerne or alfalfa hay in a horse's diet with ulcers, or for any horse really. I love to have lucerne or alfalfa in the diet for many reasons, and one of them is that it can help protect the stomach from ulceration. So there's a couple of really good times to feed lucerne. One is just before you ride your horse, so that you have the horse's stomach full of lucerne hay when you go to ride, to stop acid splash and to dilute the acid in the stomach, and to help to stop the acid from splashing up to the top part of the stomach and causing ulceration. And the other good time to feed lucerne, and it's not as hay but as chaff, is if you're feeding your horse a grain-based feed. Having some lucerne chaff in with that grain-based feed actually negates some of the negative impact of grain on the stomach. So grains will increase the risk of gastric ulceration, but feeding lucerne as chaff or chopped hay in with that grain can help reduce that negative impact of the grain on the stomach. And then the rest of my answer to the best types of hay to feed a horse with ulcers is as many different types of hay as you can find. And it's not so much from a stomach health perspective, it's more from a hindgut health perspective. But when we feed lots and lots of different types of forages, so lots of different types of hay, we get a lot of fibre diversity, and then that fibre diversity supports microbe diversity in the hindgut. And the more diverse we can have the microbes in the hindgut, the healthier the hindgut is, and the more resilient the hindgut microbes are. So they're a lot harder to knock out of balance when their populations are diverse. So from the perspective of, any hay will fill up the horse's stomach and stop the acid from splashing around and create saliva, and then a variety of hay will support hindgut health, then the best types of hay to feed a horse with ulcers are as many different types of hay as you can find, with at least some lucerne or alfalfa in the mix. Now, don't only feed lucerne or alfalfa. So while lucerne hay is an excellent hay for horses with ulcers, you can't just feed lucerne hay. If you just feed lucerne hay, there will be too much protein and too much calcium in the horse's diet, which, depending on the horse, will cause a range of issues, which are a topic of another conversation. But just know that my limit usually for a horse in work especially is 2 to 4 kilograms of lucerne per day. If they're in very hard work and they'll be sweating a lot, I'd prefer to keep that around the 2 kilograms per day mark, so that you're not overfeeding protein and causing excessive urination and electrolyte deficiency, which may then cause them to tie up. If you have a bred mare that's got a foal at foot and she's producing milk, then it's not unreasonable to feed up to 6 kilograms of lucerne per day. So it just depends on the horse, but don't just feed lucerne. So feed some lucerne and then feed as many different types of grassy or cereal hay. There's possibly one thing that you should look for in hay, and it's always best to buy hay based on an analysis. And if you buy hay from someone like Feed Central in Australia, or you have your hay tested, or can buy hay with an analysis in other parts of the world, it's best to do that. And potentially, if you have a horse with ulceration, it's probably best to feed hays that are low in starch and non-structural carbohydrates, because those starches and non-structural carbohydrates may ferment a lot in the horse's stomach, and that may irritate the ulceration in there by creating additional acid in the stomach. So very high fructan oaten hays, for example, or barley hays may be worth avoiding if you have a horse with ulceration. But otherwise, just find as many different types of hay as you can find and incorporate at least some lucerne hay in there. We've answered probably the second question, which is, can you suggest how much lucerne hay I should feed my horse daily to help with ulcers? So to help with ulcers, you certainly can feed lucerne hay. As I just mentioned, don't just feed lucerne hay. Have lucerne hay as a part of the diet, but not the only forage in the diet, because it will oversupply protein and it will oversupply calcium, and that will cause various issues for different types of horses. So say you had a young performance horse that was still growing and you were feeding lots and lots of lucerne to prevent gastric ulceration or to help your horse with ulceration. It's also going to really oversupply calcium and create an unbalanced calcium to phosphorus ratio, which will then cause a phosphorus deficiency. So you don't want to do that. So feed some lucerne, but 2 to 4 kilograms per day for an average size 500 kilogram horse when in work, more for brood mares, but don't have it as the only forage in the diet. In fact, this is where the My Happy Horse Virtual Nutritionist app really comes in handy, because you can actually put your horse's diet in to the virtual nutritionist, and you will be able to see whether the amount of lucerne you are feeding is too much or too little, and it will warn you if the amount of protein is too high or the calcium phosphorus ratio is unbalanced, and you will be able to see what the ideal amount of lucerne hay is for your horse. And it depends also to some extent on which hard feeds you are feeding and what the rest of the horse's diet looks like. So it's always good to do a complete diet analysis. Our next question is, my mare is showing anxious behaviour at the moment. I suspect ulcers. What is the best I can give her to settle things down and ease her gut? So the first thing I'd really love to do with horses like this is actually a gastroscope to see whether the horse does have ulcers, and importantly, where the ulcers are in the stomach. So the squamous ulcers in the top part of the stomach are a completely different disease condition to the glandular ulcers in the bottom part of the stomach. What causes them are different, and how we treat them are different. So if you can work with your vet, first of all, to determine where the ulcers are, and then to determine an appropriate treatment strategy for your horse, that's ideal. As far as nutrition goes to help them settle things down, there's a few things you can do. So you can increase the amount of forage they're getting. So if your horse is fed hay particularly, look and see if you can feed more hay so that your horse has the opportunity to chew on more forage throughout a 24-hour period, which just keeps the saliva flowing into their stomach and keeps the pH as high as possible. So the medications that we typically use to treat gastric ulcers, things like omeprazole and ranitidine, they reduce or block acid production in the stomach and allow the pH in the stomach to come up to create an environment that will help that horse's stomach heal. So feeding lots and lots of hay and having it available in a 24-hour, constantly available over a 24-hour period, means that your horse is able to use their natural saliva production that happens when they chew hay to also increase the pH of the stomach. If there's ulcers there, you must work with your vet to treat them initially, but for long-term prevention, then using hay and saliva production to naturally prevent ulcers is great. As far as settling things down, if you think she's got ulcers there at the moment, if you are using a grain-based feed, it may be worth considering swapping to a lower starch feed or a non-grain feed, so that because we know that the more we increase starch in a diet, the more prone horses become to ulceration. So if we try to reduce the amount of starch in her diet, that might let things settle down as well. There really is some excellent gut health supplements on the market. So ones that have got the calcified marine algae that will also help buffer the acid in her stomach and increase the pH for you. There's ones that have the amino acids glutamine and threonine, and some also have proline and serine, and those amino acids essentially feed the gut wall and help her to repair the damage that's in the gut wall, and also help to make sure that they are producing enough mucus in the bottom part of the stomach to protect themselves from the acid that they produce down in the bottom part of the stomach. There's also products that have got pectin and lecithin. There's quite a few sort of functional ingredients we can use in gut health supplements that might help. Certainly having some lucerne hay in her diet is an excellent idea. As we've just discussed, don't just feed lucerne hay, but certainly incorporating in some lucerne hay, and particularly feeding lucerne hay before you ride, so that you are riding with a stomach that is beautifully buffered by the lucerne and has got the fibre in there to stop the acid from splashing around, is a great idea. And making sure that she's got access to some really nice quality protein. So if you're using a balancer pellet or a hard feed, looking for ones that have got some soybean protein, which is an excellent source of essential amino acids to help your horse, again, to repair any damage in the stomach and to continue to produce proper amounts of mucus to protect the bottom part of their stomach. And I think probably the most important thing for me, though, goes back to just having lots and lots of forage available. So if she's at pasture, Giving her free access to pasture, not having her in a stable where she's restricted from pasture is a good idea. Or if your mare is on hay, then making sure that there is hay available 24/7. Our last question for today is, I have an 18-year-old Shetland pony that is 250 kilograms on pasture and he's losing weight. What can I feed it? So, as I said in the introduction, a Shetland pony that's losing weight is actually quite an interesting little creature. So the first place my mind goes on this one is, what are this Shetland pony's teeth doing? So 18 years is not old, but it's not young either. And if this little guy or little girl hasn't been seeing a dentist regularly, then I would definitely have a equine veterinary dentist come and investigate the pony's mouth. And for everyone, if your horse starts unexpectedly losing weight, the first thing you should do is get their teeth checked, because they'll do all sorts of funny things in their mouth. A horse's teeth grow constantly because their diet is so abrasive. They have evolved to have teeth that grow constantly. But because they grow constantly, they also get all sorts of issues in their mouth on our modern day diet. So yeah, they'll get very sharp points. There could be a lot of pain in their mouth. There could be a tooth that has specific problems that is causing a lot of pain. Your pony may have lost a tooth, and then the opposing tooth has gotten really long because it didn't have a surface to grind against, which is making it difficult to chew. So that's probably what I'd suspect potentially is going on with a Shetland pony that is at pasture and losing weight. So have their teeth checked out first, and then if their teeth are healthy and the pony is still losing weight, I would think that there's something medically going on there, because Shetland ponies typically won't lose weight. They're such good little doers that they normally don't need access to much at all to maintain their weight, and the bigger problem is normally keeping weight off them. So also a really good idea just to do an overall health check. Hopefully you'll find it is their teeth, and it's quite possibly at 18 years it's something that you will be able to fix. And then that pony should be able to go on to maintain weight on pasture, no worries. If there are significant issues in the mouth that mean that the pony can't chew very well anymore, then you need to add more fibre, more forage into your pony's diet in forms that it doesn't need to chew a lot. So that can be hay pellets, soaked hay cubes, chaff is a really good one. And then there's alternate fibre sources, so things like sugar beet pulp and lupin hulls and soybean hulls and copra meal. So they're all really good sources of fibre. And your pony needs between 1.5% and 2% of their body weight per day in those easy to chew fibre sources. So that means if the pony is, so if you listen, Brian Nielsen in my interview with him said, I could do some math, but that would involve math. But for a 250 kilo horse at 2% body weight, that would be 5 kilos of alternate forages that you would feed per day. So giving your pony, 5 kilograms of chaff and hay pellets and soaked hay cubes, something like that, would mean that they should easily be able to maintain weight. And then even if they can't chew, still allowing them access to pasture so that they can, they can still graze, they can still have their head down grazing. There's a friend of mine's got an old horse that has virtually no back teeth. He can still graze, he still has incisors, but he has virtually no back teeth, and he just grazes the entire time. So he doesn't actually swallow anything because he can't chew up the hay, but in still grazing and still chewing, like just gumming the grass that he does eat, it means he's still getting the saliva production he needs to keep the rest of his gastrointestinal tract healthy, and it still gives them the mental stimulation of chewing. So it's really important that you still give them access to pasture, but be aware if they can't consume enough pasture that you need to add in the forage or fibre sources into their diet that they can actually eat. So it's chaff or pellets or soaked hay cubes. The other thing to do is just check the pony's diet. So if there is a really severe deficiency, it's potentially going to cause weight loss. So if they're severely zinc deficient or severely iodine deficient because they haven't been supplemented with those nutrients, or there might be something funny going on in their pasture that means that a particular nutrient is very low, it would be good to run a diet analysis on their on their actual diet that they're eating to see if you can identify any nutrient deficiencies or even nutrient toxicities, depending on what you're currently supplementing them with. The My Happy Horse Virtual Nutritionist app can do that for you if you enter in what the pony is currently being fed, and then it will show you what nutrients are not being supplied in the diet, and then help you balance the nutrients back up. So it is always important with a horse that is not able to maintain weight that you are feeding a balanced diet, or make sure that their diet that you are feeding is balanced, because that gives them the best chance of maintaining weight. But I hope that helps with those questions, and I hope anyone listening to this has taken away something that might help you with your horse. Please do go back and have a listen to the other episodes of the Happy Horse Nutrition podcast, particularly the first and second episodes where we talk about feeding your horse like a horse and the gastrointestinal tract, because the knowledge in those two podcasts is really foundational to being able to feed horses well and keep them happy and healthy, both physically and mentally. Thanks for being here, and I will catch you soon. If you'd like to know more about the My Happy Horse Virtual Equine Nutritionist, you can head on over to myhappy.horse. And also, while you're there, check out the Dr. Nerida AI, which is me in AI format. And that version of me is happy to answer your questions about horse nutrition 24/7. Thanks again, and we'll catch you soon.